pues a mí me gustaría que lo siguiéramos visitando aquí en la biblioteca de Covelo. Está tranquilo y muy bonito aquí.
Cuando no nos podemos reunir, nos comunicamos por Zoom o una llamada telefónica o por texto.
Donde nos visite, porque ha sido nuestra casa. A veces nosotros vamos a Willits y puede ser en el parque. Gaby llega, como hacemos un resumen de cómo ha ido nuestra semana o qué hemos hecho de nuevo, cómo va el trabajo. Luego hacemos las actividades del libro. Vemos si podemos hacer un juguetito nuevo para Máximo. A veces ella lo evalúa, cómo está su sentido motriz, qué ha aprendido de nuevo, nuevas palabras, y jugamos un ratito y conversamos.
A mí personalmente también me ayudó mucho a obtener mi licencia a conducir, que era un objetivo que teníamos en cuanto a la familia,
sí,
para poder estar tranquilos, así que encuentro que ha sido fundamental el apoyo.
el objetivo del programa es que las familias estén bien, y que las familias estén bien significa niños felices, niños sanos, y eso en un futuro es adultos sanos y un mundo mejor. Entonces está bueno.
Cinco de Mayo, we're going to call the Mendocino Council of Governments meeting to order at 1:30. So could we have roll call, please?
Director Raffanan? Director Klein?
Present.
Director Allman?
Present on Zoom.
Thank you. Director Hansen? Director Carter?
Present.
Director Chris?
Here.
Caltrans Tasha Allstrand? I see you, Tasha. Yes, okay. And Chair Haschek.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance now, so all could rise. Ready? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, God, visible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, on Assembly Bill 2449, notifications and considerations, are there any special requests?
We have not received any AB 2449 requests.
Okay, so we're going to convene as the RTPA. We're going to recess as the RTPA and reconvene as the Policy Advisory Committee. Okay, so with the consent calendar, any polls?
Move approval.
I will second.
Okay, any public comment? We're on the consent calendar. Okay. Okay. Seeing no public comment, none online. Okay, we have a motion, we have a second.
Roll call. Director Klein?
Aye.
Director Allman?
Aye.
Director Carter?
Aye.
Director Chris?
Aye.
Caltrans Tasha Allstrand?
Aye.
And Chair Haschek.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, so that passed. Go to public expression for items not on the agenda.
Okay. Okay, I had a prepared statement for today, but I feel like I need to move just right into what we really need to happen today. So our humidity dropped right now. Last I checked, it was about 21%. Our wind speed's really high. Our grasses are drying out. Caltrans seems to be doing the best they can. I know we don't have chemicals, so I want to thank them for mowing. I know we're pretty strict about that around here, and that was something that we really pushed for in the past. So we want to keep that history and keep that foundation. But what we need today directly is to have, we've got a lot of people already coming up to enjoy our woods and our spaces. And so we need to have dragging trailer chains, start fires, tow responsibly. We need to have those signs lit possibly today. I'd like to ask for Mendocino County, Lake County, Humboldt, Tehama, Del Norte, and anything further north as the humidity starts to drop all the way up to Eureka and cross over to Redding. That includes 299, Highway 36, and 162 also, please. So we need to make sure that that alert gets out as soon as possible, especially with the way the grasses are. That being said, another thing I've noticed already, a lot of is that our roads are really getting roughed up by out-of-county vehicles. This includes AT&T and PG&E and their dual tired vehicles. These are vehicles that are close to 2 tons. They're driving around really fast, up to 45 miles an hour and 25-mile-an-hour zones, and they're turned a lot of the roads that we've already fixed into rubble. So any out-of-county vehicles that are being used in our county, we need to make sure that we can account for those vehicles and get the taxes that they're paying and the registration fees that they're paying and the tire size tax fee when they're buying their tires in Sonoma County and coming up here and using them every day. We need to have an account of those vehicles. I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but we need that money. They can't just keep coming up here from Sonoma County, driving around all day, ruining our roads, going out to Lake Pillsbury with these 2 tons of vehicles, cranes, and operating in this manner and turning our roads to mincemeat. These are very heavy vehicles, and they aren't even registered in our county. Thank you.
Thank you, Gizmo. Okay. Moving on, any further public expression online? Okay, very good. Moving on to the regular calendar. Number 8, fiscal year 2025-26, RTPA budget presentation and workshop. So I'd like to thank the staff for meeting with me the other day and going over the budget and helping me to understand it better. And so I'm turning to staff for their presentation.
Thank you, Chair Haschak. I would like to share my screen of the presentation that I prepared. Okay, can you? All right. Okay, looks like I can manipulate my screen. Thank you. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Some of you are familiar with our budget development process, and others not so much. So today we can walk through it together. You do have my written report in the packet, detailing the steps taken through the work of our committees so far and where we are in this process. I've updated my usual slide presentation here to reflect the current economic outlook, and also this is available on our board meeting webpage. I just uploaded that this morning. So we don't have to spend a lot of time on all of the slides today, maybe just focus on the important highlights and where you have questions. We'll just play that by ear as we go along, I guess. And before I forget, if any of you committee members who were involved in this have comments along the way, of course, feel free to chime in. And just briefly on this image there, each year I like to choose a photo I've taken that features transportation somewhere in our beautiful Mendocino County scenery. And this one was taken northbound on US 101, looking east to North State Street near Calpella, and with a rainbow on St. Patrick's Day. So it's a beautiful day. All right, so this is just a quick overview of the major types of funds that we have. The Transportation Development Act is a combination of local and state funds. MCOG is responsible for administering the TDA here in Mendocino County. And you might have heard some of this we talked about this some in the orientation presentation a couple of months ago. But just to refresh you on this, there are the other state funds listed here are available for planning and for transit. I did drop off of this small graphic here the active transportation and Caltrans shop funds, as those are for the Covelo Trail project, and that's winding down. It's nearly completed now. So we've been drawing down those funds. And the annual federal funds are routinely exchanged for state funds. That makes things a little easier. And I have more info on that on the following slides here. The new source that started flowing in the current fiscal year is, of course, the Northern Rural Energy Network, the NREN program we've talked so much about lately. Are we getting a little feedback somewhere? A little audio noise there. That's not a bother. Okay. And just quickly, in your agenda packet, you have a one-page summary. Looks like this. You don't have the color tints. That's just to show you where things are on that page, corresponding with the funds I just showed you. And you have this 4-page detailed supplemental format, I call it. And this one is arranged by local, state, and federal sources. Also, just a little different layout. It allows for some more itemizing and notes. Also has a comparison to the previous year. And for now, I've got the NREN program landing under the state funds, which is fairly appropriate. Those are approved by the CPUC. So that's where I put those for the time being. And I've updated the notes on the funding sources for more detail. I update those annually. This year I dropped off the several different COVID relief funds from this list. They've all been drawn down and were expended as of last year. And now for this I've added the NREN Energy Program funds to these notes. So here's where I'd like to spend the time mostly. These are the main points of the revenues, and then I'll get to the allocations. The county auditor provides an estimate annually. It's due by February 1st, as required by TDA, and that was at $4.3 million at the time, $4,306,000. So in April, we asked for an update and received a revised estimate just in time for our committee meeting. It was a little hectic last week. We got the estimate on Tuesday, and then we met with the chair on Wednesday, right before the transit committee packet went out. So at least we had the update in the transit committee packet, and on Thursday we had the transit meeting using the new estimate because they're looking at the transit claim. So anyway, you can see here that compared to the past several years, we're seeing a decline in local revenues, and that may just be the beginning of a new downward trend, the way things are going. So you can see here, I noted the past couple of years, these are audited years, showing actuals. We had $4.5 million in 22-23, for 0.375 in the last audited year, 23. So now we're at 4.1. It's starting to dip down. So fortunately, though, we have been able to build the reserve funds in anticipation of the uncertainties ahead. So that's looking pretty healthy right now. We may be needing that. I'll talk more about the reserve as we go along, but there is a recommendation for both committees to set that at 10% of the auditor's estimate. The state transit assistance from fuel taxes is just starting to dip a little. It's been around $1 million. It's been above $1 million in the last couple of years. But this also is an expected trend as the state plans for a restructuring of transportation revenues overall. So we're looking for other ways to fund transportation in this state. That's well along. There's a lot going on with that. But it's still at a good level that kind of helps make up for some of the local sales tax funds. So we do also have the new Senate Bill 125 transit funding to fall back on for the next year or two. We don't want to continue to use it as, you know, to fill gaps, but next up on the agenda today, you will see we have an amendment to that allocation plan, so we will be talking more about that. And that's for, it is meant for, to keep transit operators whole and to fill some of their budget gap. And it also is for infrastructure. So anyway, oh, and also we have the new NREN program, and we'll be well underway by this next budget with the new energy services. And this amount here, $433,000, is just program staffing services. So total revenues under this draft budget come to 14. And any questions or discussion so far? Not, I can keep moving, and plenty more we can talk about.
Let's see, the Technical Advisory Committee was able to see the new revised budget?
Not yet. They're meeting later this month, the third Wednesday, I think it is, May 1st. And we are in this, under this new estimate, recalculating those items that are based on percent, which I think we're coming up on that here in this slide too. It does reduce the executive committee recommendation we already had, but for the materials I'm showing you at this point, we've recalculated the 2% for bike and pedestrian and the 3% target for planning. So they will, those together I think are down around $6,000 or $7,000. They will be seeing that and adjusting. I think they have room in their overall planning work program. There's a project reserve in there that's not ready to allocate. So I think they have the flexibility to accommodate that. Okay. But they will weigh in. The TAC will weigh in.
Were we able to get any kind of clarification from the auditor, controller, treasurer, tax collector about the calculations for that reduction?
I don't have any news. I think she was due back in the office out last week at a conference, I understand. So we haven't talked further about that.
Okay, thank you.
We could do that before the final budget proposal. So where did I leave off? The summary spreadsheet that you have in your packet there shows an over allocation after making these, the bike and ped and the planning, recalculating those small amounts. But it does show an over allocation that is what the transit committee looked at to see how to make that up. So the transit committee did meet. When I released the packet here, they were about to meet. So I did not change the number for the reserve. It is a recommendation from you all on the executive committee was 10%. So we had a choice, well, do we want that hard number, 431,000, or do we want to recalculate and make that actually 10%, which is about 15,000 less. So I left that open for the transit committee to discuss, and Director Carter was there at that meeting. So the updated sheet will show the transit committee did recommend recalculating that 10%. So that went down by about 15,000. And also they recommended reducing Mendocino Transit Authority's annual claim to eliminate that remaining over allocation. So that is the recommendation they're coming out with. I don't have minutes yet available, but I will be sharing all that information forward. So
Okay.
we, through committee recommendations, we have eliminated that over allocation. MTA was willing to, they're participating in these meetings with us, so they were willing to reduce their claim, and that gap will be made up in this next agenda item. We have the Senate Bill 125 funding that we have, the transit operations and capital. It's a super long name. It's if you want to know, get into that. But,
So when you say that the Transit Committee adjusted the 10%, they adjusted the total amount,
the amount,
not
they said
the 10%.
They agreed with your committee. The 10% was right, they thought. But if you recalculate it based on the revised auditor's estimate, it now comes to $416,000.
Okay.
431.
So we're still keeping
It's
that
still
10% reserve.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so let's see, did I cover that mainly? So transit is still getting a bump up though, from 24-25 budget. That's not comparing to actuals. That is compared to budget, is going up. So they've got from all the 3 Transportation Development Act sources, the local transportation funds, the state transit assistance, and the capital reserve altogether, they're up a couple $100,000 for what they claim. That's about 4.5%. Meanwhile, the planning, well, before I move on to that, you know, we still have to hope that this year's funds come in as according to budget. We may still come up short if sales tax is down. So that's when we hit up the reserve. That's what that's for. So what else? We think the planning program is doing all right. There was a bump up in state assistance on our rural planning assistance funds. Go through slides, I can show more of that. And we have some active grants. So planning program has multiple sources. They're going to be okay for this year. Talk about that as we go. So what else? The federal funds. We do have some amount of federal funds. Those are unknown at this point. Though I will say we have not heard that the ones that we receive are being targeted at all. So we're going on the assumption in the budget. I put in those estimated numbers and hope that we get those federal funds.
And you're on page 20 of the packet.
Am I? I don't know. I'm going by the slides here.
You're on page
I don't
4
have,
of 4.
My packet's not numbered. I have a printed packet, I'm sorry. Yeah, it may not follow the staff report exactly, but kind of talking through the slides in the way that these are prepared. So the only thing left to talk about on this particular slide is the energy program funds. Those should be secure. Those have been collected through people's utility bills. There's a totally different revenue stream, and those funds have been accumulating for a long time. They're sitting in a fund. We think those are going to be okay. So proposed allocations is $9.6 million. That's well short of what the revenues are I just showed you, but that's mainly because of this Senate Bill 125 as $5 million-ish in it that we haven't yet allocated. It's a separate process going through with the amendment, and also we don't really have a process yet for MTA to claim those. So we haven't offered that up for allocation in this budget draft. Any other comments, questions? I'll be getting into more details As we go.
Any questions, comments? Let's see, Gizmo? Yeah, go ahead.
Not having a chance to go over the fine print, my question is, utilizing our public transit as part of our emergency evacuation plan for the coast for like maybe tsunamis or emergencies. I'd like to make sure that there is some kind of program put in place, budgeted or not budgeted, to include the MTA at least in the tsunami warnings and how we're going to possibly use those. And that might open us up for federal and state funding that can be directly allocated to safely evacuating people from the coast, especially since we know this season a lot of folks are going to drive all the way over from Rockland and places. We're going to have a big influx of people escaping the heat, and where they're going to end up like they did in Sonoma County is on our coastline, and that brings our communications down to zero, as it did in 4th of July. We lost communications for the whole weekend. So if we have a tsunami and sirens and we have no communication and everyone is on the coast, our MTA should definitely be a part of what's going on if that situation happens. We're putting ourselves in a bad place, and we need to make sure that we can move these people safely out of harm's way. Thank you.
Thank you. No further comments from the board? Okay.
So we do have some more slides we could look at. This is in your packet. It just shows that so far this year, 8 months, 4 months left to go. We're down by 1.1%, and we're hoping those to come in and meet the budget. And then these, you can look at these on your own if you like. It just shows you kind of the trend is still going up. You know, you had this dip at the Great Recession here, then you had the COVID bump, and now things are kind of leveling off. I could talk about how we do the LTF reserve. Basically, it's always a 3-year window that we're looking at. This has always been the final step before we go to allocations. It tells you how much there may be above and beyond the reserve balance you want to set. Right now, we're in this middle window here, setting what will be the balance. If there's excess funding above and beyond that, that goes in that's allocated in the budget. So where we are right now, this point, I've changed it so it's the first allocation step. In some discussion with our committee, it was a little hard to follow how this calculation works, and so in your long form budget sheet, I've got the full available balance here, showing what was audited, balance, what we had actually an excess unallocated revenue from the last audited year, 23-24. That's added in for $130,000, and we had the balance. It's pretty drawn down pretty far, but last year we put more money in. And then there's also that MTA repayment plan that's making deposits. So we have this revenue available of $638,000. And then for the first time, I moved this down to allocations, what you'd like to keep in the fund as an allocation to the fund. So there's your 10%. As I said, I didn't recalculate it for this meeting, that 431. And this is all the repayments MTA will be making into the fund. We want to keep, it's not completed yet, so we want to keep that in there. So that's how much we'll like to stay in the fund. Actually, it's going to be a little lower number now. I think we've got 607. Okay, and so then you move on to the allocation priorities that we have according to Transportation Development Act. Administration's off the top 2% for bike and ped is optional. Planning program target is 3%. Transit gets everything else. And they can claim that. Maybe I should mention that the Transit Committee did make a recommendation. There are no unmet needs that are reasonable to meet this year. This will come back to you next month with the final budget in form of a resolution. And, you know, we will have this, I'm building this whole package. You'll get one of these documents. It'll be online, digital form, but we're building all those resolutions and things that go. So this is basically an overview of what comes out of the local transportation fund. And again, a trend of the allocations. You can see that you had the Great Recession back here. I like to look that far back just to see how it's been going. And so we got the COVID bump, was kind of a one-off. We're not going to see that again, I don't think. And so we're leveling off about this $4 million, a little over $4 million mark. Pre-pandemic levels. See, I did update these. You can see our contract, excuse me. So the administration contract has CPI inflation rate built into it. The other direct costs, we just try to keep those consistent and within about a $50,000 to $60,000 range. We do have a new administration contract. Started October 1st, 2024, last October. So we do try to constrain those other direct costs. And as far as the contract, Nafili has endeavored to spread these costs appropriately across other available funds than the local transport. So our percent of the budget is usually 5% or less for all of the funds that we oversee. The planning, this is kind of just a snapshot again of how that looks. The Technical Advisory Committee will be weighing in on that and bringing back their recommendation. Again, we have a new 5-year contract for the planning services with Consulting, also known as DBC, that also started last October. I'm just moving quickly through these. But sometimes Lexi's here to talk about the planning program. This is the first draft, so the Technical Advisory Committee will look at this again. There are some comments from Caltrans. They will be addressing, and also we don't have all of the carryover funds. For instance, here's a 0 on the Noyo Harbor. That doesn't mean there won't be any funds for that. It just means they're going to bring the actual numbers in an amendment early in the fiscal year when they know exactly how much that is. So some of these multi-year projects will have carryover. Just say no planning.
Well, I think the board had a summary of the draft OWP at last month's meeting, so it will be refined a little bit. It will reflect like the reduction in the LTF that's going into the OWP, but this is essentially what it will be. That reduction in the LTF will be reflected in that last project reserve line item that you see right now. So more on that next month.
Yes, you'll be getting a final to look at next month. So I'll just conclude with the transit and then briefly the federal funds after that. So here's where we are with the transit allocations, again, looking at that 3-year window. So when the executive committee met in February, the annual claim was recommended as submitted. They were claiming all available local transportation funds and the transit assistance. It was in the draft budget. And then, of course, the transit committee met last Thursday, and they had the revised estimate, And as I said, they're recommending a revised claim, and that's what I'm showing here. So it's still a little bump up in operations for MTA. And the main reason for that, even though our estimate is down, well, this year we're not having to backfill the reserve like we had to do last. So there's more funds available to be allocated. Trying to keep the senior centers whole, but on the other hand, also trying to make sure that's sustainable, that we can continue to fund them at this level. And with funds going down, I think the recommendation was not to over-allocate that. Let's see, anything else? Yeah, I talked about no unmet needs are reasonable to meet. We look carefully at all of that. It's just that there is that list that you saw at the public hearing, but those, none of those were really feasible at this time or would have funding available in this coming year. And they're always working, MTA is always working on trying to move things along so that they can be, things that come up on the list over and over can be positioned for funding. So these transit allocation tends to run about 80% of the budget, more or less, of the local transportation funds. That's what let's see. So they are the final priority in the of the local transportation funds, and I did not try to factor into this graphic the reallocation that happened this year in the repayment plan of those. You know, they had a little too much local funding because they had drawn down all their federal COVID relief, and so that changed things up a bit. But so I'm trying to focus here on the new funds. We do have a plan where they're taking care of that over allocation. A lot of it's going into, well, there's some going into capital projects, and a lot of it's going into our reserve funds that are for transit benefit. Yeah, and just quickly, as a reminder, we have these other funds. There's planning grants that are competitive. We usually get something every year. That's things like the Nill Harbor and the sea level rise, roadway impact study, things like that. Yeah, they're competitive, but we've done well with those, and we generally have one of those in the program. Let's see, the active transportation program, that's much harder to get money for. It's really the only place to go in the state. California has rolled together all their state and federal funds together into this one program, and it's highly competitive. Not enough to go around on that, but we have had some money. You know, it's funded our flow trail. Like to talk about?
Yeah, just quickly, I'll just say that in general, I think Mendocino County as a whole for a rural agency or for a rural community has been pretty successful in the ATP program. The application process is a heavy lift, so not easy for MCOG or our local agencies to put one of those together, but we have had some successes, including Mendocino County DOT in the most recent cycle was one of only like 4 successful applications in the small urban and rural pot of funding in that program. So we're doing pretty well. It is still a very difficult program, though.
Yeah, so the last thing on this page here is the State of Good Repair Fund for Transit. That's a formula. We do bank those in our MTA cash accounts and program projects with the state. MTA tells us what they need, and that has helped out quite a bit for things like vehicles and their roof repair. It's infrastructure type of. Yeah, and there are some other SB1 funds that go straight through to the cities and county. They flow down directly from that. We don't see those funds. Just this is the surface transportation block grant. Those are the ones I said were federal. We swap them out for state funds. We do count on these funds. You can see they're still moving up. It's around $1 million a year at this point. It's really a lot under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. We're getting about $1 million a year, so that's the way we use those are. Well, I should say they're most flexible funds that we really have that can be used for anything under Article 19 of the California Constitution, transportation. And these are adopted policies by MCOG. This is how we use the funds. So the partnership program gets $100,000 off the top, and that has gone to match other funds to get projects done. Built projects generally. We have this staff position for local assistance that comes out of that, and the rest, about 3/4 of it, goes out by our own formula to cities in the county. So you're all getting a piece of that. Sometimes it's saved up a bit, and sometimes, you know, for instance, the county claims it every year. And let's see. Formula allocation this year for this budget coming up is about $900,000, and you know, they, depending on the formula, they're getting between about $100,000 or so for Point Arena, and I'm seeing $263,000 for Ukiah. They've got the roads, I guess. It's a urban roads formula. So these balances, the balance of that fund is in that audit that you just accepted on the consent calendar today. Find that in the notes section. And a new one here is a Northern Rural Energy Network. These are just a few notes that are in your budget notes explanatory notes to the budget on the funds. And this is our most recent venture. It's just getting off the ground, of course. But here's a little background on it. The total budget for all of the 4 partners is $33 million. We're getting $2.5 million out of that. And this coming up will be only the second year. We put funds in the budget, and that's really just for our staff and some direct costs, direct expenses, travel and things. We are not getting these other funds. It's all those rebates and incentives that are coming. We're not going to have that cash in our bank. Those, we're actually looking at a third party to process payments to people who claim rebates and incentives. So this is just the portion of the budget that's for our staff. And it's only for 4 years, but the NREN partnership does intend to apply for another 4 years. It was originally for 8 years. Yeah.
So with the 4-year plan for the budget at 2.4 million, and the first 2 years are about 700,000, so we'd have 1.7 for the second, for the third and fourth year.
Yeah, I'll let Nafili speak to that. There's probably other things in there that I don't.
Yeah, it's not really distributed evenly across the 4 years because really the first year was like just the last quarter. So it was really like 3 1/4 years. So the first year was significantly less, and then it increases over the remaining 3 years.
Okay, so is there a plan for staffing if the budget, because that can only be used for staffing, correct?
So we have, it's staffing and direct expenses, not including rebates and incentives. So there are some direct expenses for like training. So, you know, hiring specialists to come and provide training, maybe as part of the workforce education and training program.
Kits, what about the kits?
The kits, yes, the energy efficiency kits that are available for customers. That's another example of the direct expenses. Consultants, if we need to, you know, if there's things that are beyond what our staff can do, because we only have two full-time and a few hours here and there for other staff dedicated to REN. So the staffing doesn't, increase really, but there is some money budgeted for hiring a consultant for some additional work within that.
Okay, and getting the word out to people, like public
Yeah.
relations and all
Yes.
that.
Yes, marketing cost is definitely
Yeah.
a significant part of it. And it's a lot of what we've done so far is preparing for those marketing things. And we do have an NREN report under reports today that Orion will be giving you some highlights of what we've been doing. But yeah, so it increases over the 4 years, but our staffing will not increase for NREN beyond what we have now within that time frame.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we're still ramping up on that. That's going to get going more in the coming years. So I'm reaching my conclusion here. What's not in the budget? Of course, there's the STIP program. That's all capital funding. We don't see that cash. That goes straight out to the members, agencies that have projects. MCOG programs in to that program. And of course, the Safe Motorist Aid Callbox system has its own separate budget. And this is where we are. We're almost there with the budget. Looks like we have another PAC committee meeting, and we need to convene the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, have them take one more look at those unmet transit needs. And then we plan on adopting the budget on June 2nd at our next meeting. I will be, as I said, preparing all the allocating resolutions, detailed exhibits, required findings, and I'll be bringing all that to you next meeting. And I will have that final budget online, or you can ask for a paper copy of it. And typically, the planning program amends several times throughout the year. I don't come back here and have you have to do a full budget amendment based on that. So we just kind of do it administratively, but you will approve those overall work program amendments. And we hope not to require any amendments during the year, but that's always an option if necessary. That is my final slide there. So the questions that you have. I think I'll stop sharing. We're not asking for an action today. If you had any direction for staff, we're happy to receive that. I don't think we have any formal actions. I'm going to stop the sharing there.
I would like to thank MCOG and for all their work. I know that you guys put up with me, but you're working really hard. We're going to create some really cool solutions here. And also everyone who's here working and taking their time to do, what they're doing. So thank you, everybody. And don't forget Indigenous Women's Day today.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments online?
Oh, we love our bus stop in River Valley. We love our bus stop in River Valley. Thank you. The infrastructure part.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on to item 9. Approval of Resolution M 2025 and the number to be put in there, amending the SB 125 Formula-Based Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program and Zero Emission Transit Capital Program Allocation Plan.
All right. So SB 125 created this new formula-based program, the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program and Zero Emission Transit Capital Program, to distribute funding over a 5-year period, which is actually now extended, to distribute funding for transit capital, but also to address the fiscal cliff that transit agencies around the state were facing at that time and continue to face. So funding was first made available in fiscal year 23-24. The MCOG board approved the initial allocation plan in December of 2023, and we submitted that to the state and have drawn funds down into an account. That initial allocation plan approved about roughly $5 million in funding out of a total of $11,063,615, which is available to the Mendocino County region for the entire span of the program. So we have the ability to amend our allocation plan to make changes to what's already been allocated and to allocate the remaining funds, and so that is what we are proposing today. MCOG has worked closely with MTA, who is the only eligible public transit operator in our region, so the only eligible recipient of these funds with the exception of MCOG for administration. So we've worked closely with MTA to come up with a plan to utilize these funds. In our initial allocation plan, at the recommendation of the California State Transportation Agency, we combined everything that we had proposed at that time into one project. And this is to allow flexibility with spending from one activity to another, but also to ensure that by grouping things, you know, if you have one activity you want to do within your project that maybe doesn't achieve all the goals of the program, which is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, increase transit ridership, and avoid service cuts. So if you have something that maybe doesn't meet, you know, doesn't deliver on those goals to the same extent, by combining it with other things, it helps your overall project. So we grouped things into one project plus the administration, and the program identified how much was available to MCOG for administration. That was part of the initial allocation. So we have, through this amendment, we are proposing to add a second project and add an activity to the first project. So we have now project one, which was the project that was included in the first allocation plan. It had originally included funding for development and improvement of transit facilities in the Ukiah area. That includes the Ukiah Transit Center, improvements to the administrative and maintenance facilities, and charging infrastructure, including potential hydrogen fueling infrastructure, which this board just approved approved carbon reduction program funding to look at feasibility of hydrogen fueling recently. So they'll be pursuing that, and then this would provide the capital funding for those needs. The development of those things is expected to be a lot more than the funding that we have available here, so it would rely on competitive transit and intercity rail capital program funding to fully fund those improvements. But this would essentially be matching funds for that program. So that is still in here, and in the revised resolution that was added to your packet, and I think for those in the room, you received a hard copy of that. We have identified $4,652,980 for that particular part of Project 1. Then in addition to that, we have zero-emission vehicle replacement. This helps MTA on their path of replacing their fleet with zero-emission vehicles. And there's a portion of this, so the total SB 125 funding is split between the TIRCP and the ZETCP, and so the ZETCP is really geared towards that vehicle replacement, towards the zero-emission vehicles. And so the bulk of that, with the exception of the administrative funding, goes towards the zero-emission vehicles, and then some of the TIRCP funding as well. Another activity from the original project that is still in here, and we haven't removed anything, we've just added, so everything that was originally in here is still included. This is the pilot service project. So this is operation and capital funding in this project to create a pilot service serving Laytonville and Covelo, and this would be starting at 1 day a week and then potentially increasing to 2 days a week. So this is to fund 3 years, including initial setup and capital required for the service. So that is in here at $500,000 of the TIRCP funding.
That was an unmet transit need.
It wasn't
Both of those.
it's been an unmet transit need for many years. It then we received a grant. We applied for and received a grant through the Caltrans Planning Grant Program a few years ago, about 4 years ago now, I guess, to look at mobility, rural mobility needs, and that was one of the recommendations that came out of that study. And then the added new activity that's been added to Project 1 is purchase and installation of automated passenger counters for MTA's entire fixed route fleet. These would allow MTA to really track how their system is being used, which means that they could, it would give them, by having that data, it would give them the information that they need to maybe make route adjustments that would make more efficient routes, maybe make using those routes more attractive to riders. It would also free up the drivers and allow the drivers to focus on what they're doing, because currently that data is being collected by the drivers, which if you're driving a bus and trying to collect that data at the same time, it's not maybe always one of those things is going to suffer by spreading out your attention. So we think that that would, by relieving the drivers of that, it would result in better data. And then it would also give MTA some of the information that they need to switch over to a more simplified fare structure, which currently they have a fairly complex fare structure, and a simplified fare structure could also make transit more attractive to its users. So that is Project 1 for a total of $9,377,980. The per activity amounts that are identified are estimates, and again, that is to kind of allow flexibility in spending within that budget, within that project budget. Then Project 2 is our new project, and this is to fund operations to avoid service cuts. At the time of the initial allocation plan, MTA did not anticipate any service cuts. However, costs have continued to go up and revenues have been flat or gone down, and so they are now experiencing a deficit in their current budget year and then anticipating a deficit in the upcoming budget year as well. So the funding in the current budget year would meet the deficit. It would also provide a little bit beyond that deficit, because we are now anticipating that our revenues, the LTF revenues, may not materialize. This is based on the revised estimate that we received from the auditor. And then next year, similar situation, reduced revenues and increased expenses. So it is a total of $1,575,000 for 2 years for those operating expenses to continue existing services. And that would utilize the entire balance that is available to the Mendocino County region for SB 125. We do have one of the great things about this, two great things about this program. We have the ability to amend this in the future, even if we've submitted something that says this is how we plan to use it, say one of these things turns out to be infeasible, we can later submit an amendment and change how we plan to use those funds as long as it still fits within the intent of the funding program. The other really nice thing is that once we have drawn the funding down from the state, it does not expire. So if these things take longer, say MTA applies for that competitive grant for the transit center and they're not successful in this upcoming round of funding, if they need to reapply, those funds will still be there. So those are two really nice things about the program. So this is on today for adoption by resolution, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions, modifications, any ideas about this program? Okay, seeing none from the board. Okay, go to the public.
Good afternoon, Gizmo, Mendocino Community Climate Action Advisory Consultant. We definitely approve anything that is going to be zero emissions, and so we'd like to recommend that the board okay this.
Okay, thank you. All right. So, do we have a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll move to adopt the resolution approving the update SB 125 Fund-Based Transit and Zero Transit Capital Program.
I'll second.
All right. Okay, can we have a roll call vote?
Director Klein,
Aye.
Director Allman,
Aye.
Director Carter,
Aye.
Director Chris,
Aye.
Caltrans Tasha Ostrand,
Aye.
and Chair Haschek.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and moving on to number 10, consideration of support for Senate Bill 239.
Yes, all right. So over the last couple of years, there have been a few different attempts, proposed bills that would modify Brown Act requirements and make teleconferencing easier for local agencies. This current bill is specifically for advisory bodies to those agencies. So for MCOG, that would include our Technical Advisory Committee, our Social Services Transportation Advisory Committee, the Executive Committee, the Transit Productivity Committee. And what it would do is that, so currently if you participate, as I think many of our board members are aware, if you participate remotely, it either has to be for certain emergency reasons, and to consider it under one of those emergency reasons, there has to be a quorum of the board physically present in one location for even to be considered. And that's the AB 2449 that we have, the standing item at the beginning of any agenda. Standard Brown Act that we've been using for years does allow teleconferencing. However, each teleconferenced location from which a voting member is participating has to be identified and made available to the public. So it has to be included on the agenda, has to be noticed and made available to the public. So what this would do is that it would allow members of advisory bodies to participate without having to notice and make publicly available their location. I think this is really beneficial for regional government organizations like ours, where we have members that are participating from all over, and our advisory bodies, like the technical advisory body, is staff to our local agencies, but it is taking, if they're driving from, Fort Bragg or Point Arena, it takes a lot out of the day. Typically, they are, at their place of work anyway, so noticing those locations is not a huge big deal. But our other advisory bodies, particularly the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, they are users of the systems. They are people that are providing service, social services. They're providing social services, so they're working for senior centers. They are people that are not necessarily going to be in locations that would be publicly available locations. So it does provide some flexibility that would be particularly beneficial and maybe would increase people's willingness to participate in those groups. So for all of those reasons, we are recommending that the board adopt a position of support and authorize staff to submit a letter. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Move the recommended action.
I'll second.
There you go. Yeah, this is one of those ones that we've tried to get passed for a few years, and it just makes sense in our county with the geography that we have and the distances, and these are for advisory bodies now, so it has to be affirmed by another body. So anyway, yeah. Any public comment? Seeing none? Online, none? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote.
Director Klein?
Aye.
Director Allman?
Aye.
Director Carter?
Aye.
Director Chris?
Aye.
Caltrans Tasha Ostrand?
Abstain.
And Chair Haschek.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, now we will recess as a policy advisory committee. We'll reconvene as a regional transportation planning agency. And we will ratify action of the policy advisory committee. Do we have a motion to?
I will move that we ratify the action.
I'll second.
Okay, any public comment?
None.
Seeing none? Okay.
Director Klein?
Aye.
Director Allman?
Aye.
Director Carter?
Aye.
Director Chris?
Aye.
And Chair Haschek.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to the reports. Information, Caltrans District 1. Tasha.
Hi, thank you. I do not have any reports today unless there are any questions.
Okay. Mendocino Transit Authority. Not present right now?
I think Jacob is off this week. I know he was on earlier, but I think he may have dropped off. Yeah.
Okay, the Great Redwood Trail Agency. We had a meet and confer with the Hopland Tribe Band of Pomos the other day, and it was a good meeting to hear their perspective on some of the issues surrounding the Great Redwood Trail. And the next official meeting of the Great Redwood Trail is on May 15th. It's at the Ukiah City Council Chambers and also in Eureka. That's it. MCOG staff, summary of meetings.
All right, nothing to add to this, but happy to answer any questions.
Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the administration staff, and I believe that you're going to include the Gualala Downtown Streetscape project update?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that was listed as a planning report, but I'm actually giving that. So I just wanted to give a quick update because we haven't heard much about this in a while, and this project is moving through the coastal development permit process. So this is a project being implemented by Caltrans, but MCOG has been a funding partner on this project. We provided funding, the board approved funding as part of our regional transportation improvement program for the pre-construction elements, and then staff worked with Caltrans to develop an active transportation program grant to fund construction, and then subsequently the board approved additional STIP funding or RTIP funding to supplement that construction funding. So the project will provide bicycle and pedestrian facilities in the downtown Wallala area. It will also add a two-way left turn lane in certain segments where the turn lane is particularly needed, and will add new crosswalks and enhance existing crosswalks. So they are anticipating starting construction, I believe, in 2026. So moving through not only the CDP process, but other permitting and right-of-way processes currently. The coastal development permit will be on the Wallala Municipal Advisory Council later this week to give a recommendation. So I know Caltrans is planning to be there. I will participate in that as well. In general, the project has been supported locally. There has been a concern in the past about removal of parking because the project will remove on-street parking in the Wallala area, and there had been some concerns about that for several years. We, along with Caltrans, tried to work with the community on ways to maintain on-street parking where it was feasible. However, the Coastal Commission then came out and said that they would not approve anything that included on-street parking due to inconsistencies with the Wallala Town Plan. So that's sort of ended that discussion, and the project is moving forward. The other aspect of the project that unfortunately had to be eliminated at this time was the inclusion of landscaping. There will still be a landscaped area in front of the community center at the southern end of town, but other than that, there's really no landscaping included because of Caltrans was not able to provide maintenance for landscaping, and there was not another agency that was able to do that, to take that on. So at this time, the landscaping is not included, but Caltrans has been working out ways that if in the future the landscaping maintenance became feasible, it could be added without tearing up the original project. So that is my update on that.
All right. And the next meeting date is June 2nd?
Yes. And before we move on to the planning reports, I did want to take a moment and introduce one of our new employees. So last month, I introduced the new NREN staff. However, we had another new staff member. He had actually started in February, and so it didn't occur to me in April that that was the first board meeting we had had since he started. So Hector Ortega has joined us, has joined the MCOG planning team, and he's on Zoom today, but he was actually here in person. He actually talked to you last month, and but we're really glad to have Hector on board, and I am sure you will be seeing and hearing more from him.
Welcome, Hector.
All right, and that concludes my report. Do you have any missing? All right, that concludes our admin reports.
Okay, so we'll move on to the planning staff.
Good afternoon. I'm going to start with a brief overview of Work Element 3, which is our regional and active transportation plan. The staff attended the annual Tribal Summit hosted by Caltrans. MCOG gave a presentation. The public outreach portion closed on May 1st, so we've been collecting comments. And we are currently diving into the draft element and hope to have a draft by summer, time in the summer. Work Element 5. Oh, did you want to add anything? Yes, sorry.
Yeah, let me just add to that. So the public comment, there will be other opportunities for public comment, and our online platforms are still open for people that want to add public comment, but we had to kind of draw a line of when, because we need to move forward with developing drafts. So the comments that we were going to use in preparation, we had to kind of wrap things up, but we will continue to collect public comment and there will be another push for that once we have a draft as well. So there will be further opportunities.
Thank you, Neff. Work element 5, the sea level rise roadway impact study. We've completed the procurement process. MCOG staff hosted a kickoff meeting. The consultant is currently diving into tasks, including literature review. And did you want to add anything to that? These are going to be really just updates. No? Work element 9, Noyo Harbor multimodal circulation plan. MCOG staff attended the 2-day charrette. It was well organized and led by the consultant. The two main takeaways were one was to support structured parking in the harbor, and the second one was to create organized walkways throughout the harbor. And that's it. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions about that? All right, thank you. Okay, moving on to the Northern Rural Energy Network staff.
Hi, folks. So I was here briefly a month ago. That was actually my first day. So back today, and I'm Orion Walker. I'm the program manager. Rich, our specialist, wanted to be here today, but we have a training up in Eureka, and he's getting on the road to get up there this evening for that training, and I'll be following him shortly. But the two of us have been getting our feet on the ground and getting rolling with various aspects of the NREN program. I just wanted to touch on a couple of highlights from my first staff report here, and then answer any questions that you might have for me. So we're kind of in what I would call the soft launch phase of the first residential programs at this point. And we launched the regional website a couple weeks ago, so that is up now at northernren.org, and you can go and check it out. A lot of it is still under development, and there's a lot of coming soon areas and whatnot, but folks can go on there now and look up rebate programs, apply for rebate programs, apply to receive those energy kits that you've been hearing about. So those are now active. We are not fully in promotion mode yet, though, because there are back-end logistical issues that we're still working through in terms of being able to process applications. So we want to make sure that we have all of that streamlined and ready to go before we begin our more robust outreach and marketing for those programs. And then the other aspect of that program that will be coming soon is the home assessments that we'll be offering initially over the phone, where we will walk people through doing a home energy assessment, and then providing them with reports and recommendations and working with them to access rebate programs and whatnot. So that one's coming soon. As you see in the notes here, we're navigating some things around accessing private information and figuring out whether we get that information from PG&E directly or whether we get that from customers providing us with their energy bills. But one way or the other, we need to have that information to fully process their applications for these different services. And so that's one of the things we want to make sure that we have a good strategy in place for before we start lining up a bunch of applications. So thus the kind of soft launch phase of things. And then, you know, in the meantime, we're putting together all of our marketing collateral and making plans for when we will be out in the community and really begin promoting these residential programs. And then, of course, we're doing various planning meetings for the non-residential programs and the financing programs and some of the other things that we'll be following on in the coming months. So that's kind of a basic overview of where we are at the moment, and let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, I have a couple.
Sure.
So, with these programs, do you want us to be talking about them in public, or are we at that stage yet?
I would say not quite yet. Our plan is to kind of have a launch. We're not sure if we're going to have an in-person kind of event that goes with that, but we'll definitely do some press releases and other sort of public activities to really get the word out when we feel like we're fully ready for that. And I think that we're maybe still a few weeks to a month from feeling like that is the right thing to do, because like I said before, we don't want to get a bunch of people signing up and then find out that they have to wait too long to receive the services that we're promoting. So I'd say it's a little bit early to really start talking about it that much yet.
Okay. And then on the home assessment, energy efficiency assessments, are those going to be like income levels or criteria, or how are those? How can you qualify for those?
So far, any qualifying resident in Mendocino County, which means that they're a customer and have an SAID code on their bill, would qualify for one of those assessments. And they can go on the website or give us a call and schedule that, and then fill out the application, schedule a time, and then we would do that phone assessment process with them.
Okay.
Right now we're working with our regional partners who are developing a very extensive list of questions that we will go through with folks when we're doing those assessments, and then a whole ready-made sort of list of recommendations so that we have kind of a system in place to record all that information, track it, create the reports and that sort of thing. So as that comes together, we'll be ready to then promote those and get started doing them.
Okay, that's very exciting. Any other questions? Seeing none? Any from the public? Good job. Okay.
Thanks. All right, thank you much.
Thank you. Let's see, now we go to the MCOG directors. Any reports from the directors? No. Director Allman?
Sorry about that. Nothing to report, but thank you, Chair.
Okay. Very good. All right, so with that, we have the CalCog delegate. So, yeah, we have a CalCog meeting on May 27th of the directors, and fortunately those are hybrid, so you don't have to travel to Sacramento to sit through a 2-hour meeting. And so anyway, and then there's one on June 27th also. And with that, nothing else from the board. At 2:51, we will adjourn the meeting.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you all.